Welcome to another King's Crusher radio show. It's 2016 now, and this is the first radio show of the year. So it starts around technically about 9:05, not 9. So I thought we could look at one or two notable games from the Qatar Masters. And let's have a look at the game Mamedyarov against Lenderman. This was quite an amazing game, I thought, and it happened in round 3. Now Mamedyarov has got a kind of streak of towel to him sometimes. You might think that from this game as well. Let's see what happens. D4 from Mamedyarov. Let's put on like a bit actually as well. We see knight f6 from Lenderman. C4, e6. We're going into, after knight f3, bishop b4 check. Going into this. Nimza Indian line. Knight c3. c5. Now we have g3. And black put a bit more pressure on the centre with knight c6. Seems fairly logical. Bishop g2. This actually connects a live book as well. And the most usual move played here is knight e4. We have bishop d2. Yeah, this is well trodden so far. Knight takes d2. Queen takes d2. C takes d4. Knight takes d4. So black's got hemmed in bishop at the moment, if we look fundamentally at this position. White seems to have a comfortable position, obviously hasn't got the bishop here anymore. Might have pressure down this d file. You'll note that d6 looks slightly vulnerable at the moment, potentially. We see black striking out though at d4 immediately, putting pressure on d4. That's protected. Knight e5, again, kind of forcing white's hand. What to do about c4? And we have b3. This has been seen before a few games. There's at least 6 games in live book which carry on like this. Very forcing play from black. Again, another forcing move. What does white do about c3 now? He plays rook c1. Some breathing space, some creativity space now after castling. Well, white has to castle already, generally speaking, but we're left with a comfortable position for white. This bishop is the problem piece. This is a small edge for white. This pin looks a bit nasty. Actually, the dark square grip for black looks quite comfortable. We have a6. And after rook fd1, black actually exercises the dark square pressure a bit with bishop a3. Just asking the rook to move. Rook b8, as though b5 is on the cards. And c4 is a traditional kind of target. And maybe bishop b7 after. Now we have queen e2, trying to clamp down on things. Clamps down on b5 indirectly. I think black was actually threatening, well, not necessarily b5, maybe bishop b4 actually is more significant. Okay, so queen e2 anyway keeps a kind of bind on the position. Rook d8 was played, and it's a very quiet start to the game, right? You might think this is a dull game. Why am I showing this dull game? It's going to get very exciting, very exciting. I think bishop e7, forcing move from white. F4, the knight goes back to c6, and it looks as though, yeah, the dark squares for black seem very comfortable. Like knight b4 is coming next. Is white just getting harassed here? King h2, knight b4. Okay, the rook goes to c1, and we have knight c6. Black still hasn't really solved this c8 bishop problem. White seems to have gained a little bit of space on both sides of the board, and now actually puts the queen on d3 here, and we have bishop a3. But here is where white's had enough of black doing these proxy forcing moves. And in fact, I mean, if rook c2, that's kind of a disaster here, right? Knight b4. So rook c2 is out of the question. Rook b1, black could actually be really annoying actually with bishop b4. Be super annoying, and in fact black would probably love a draw. His opponent's higher rated. Mamdorov 2748, Lenderman is 2626. So I'd be happy to get a draw by repetition. If something like this, black would be really happy probably, I assume. And where else is the rook going? I mean, how does white actually improve? Ooh, how does white actually improve this sort of position? It's not clear, because the rook should really be there, because otherwise, well, black's going to just put the bishop back to b4 soon. So anyway, but in this position, here is where there's a brilliant turn of events, which struck me as some kind of tactical genius from white. So maybe an important lesson here is that if you have energy and enthusiasm to find resources, you don't need to be continually pushed around by the opponent. There is a fantastic idea available. I'm hoping not many of you have seen this game. Has anyone actually seen this game? If you want to mention it, but it's a brilliant thing that happens now. In fact, the engines don't like what happened, but anyway, who cares? It's not all about engines. Okay, the engine is suggesting just play rook b1. So Mamdorov does something different anyway to rook b1. Can you guess what white plays? So if I give you 20 seconds, white to play here, what would you play here? So imagine you're rated 2748. You can't really just have draws like this, because you're gonna like just lose rating points, you know. You want to like crush these 2600s, don't you? Yeah. So is there anything you can do here apart from move the rook? Any ideas? Alright, now if you've said knight takes c6, yeah, there is. You'll notice at least that there's a pin on the d pawn, right? And we're hitting the queen and the rook, but unfortunately black just plays b takes c6. And what have you actually achieved here? Not too much. You still probably have to move this rook. No, but, and so from a practical point of view, this seems stronger to take with the bishop, although the engine hates it even more than knight takes. So bishop takes c6 was played, and it seems actually black may have played an inaccurate move here, which makes the game a great deal of fun. Maybe black played an inaccurate move. Apparently, I don't know, this is just superficial analysis from the engine. No, d takes, apparently this position is going to be okay for black, more than okay. Black should be okay here in this continuation. And in fact, if we like move the rook here, there's bishop b4 forking two knights, and so the best move might actually be if we do this, there's another sort of bad position here where this knight's actually stranded. So if white's forced to play something like c5, then this ends up, the engine spits out Memodorio's conception quite badly, actually. But anyway, he's not playing an engine, so that's good. So we have actually a mistake from black, and it gets to be, you know, very exciting now. So black didn't play D takes c6. On B takes c6, then this is completely different actually, because knight takes c6, then we're hitting the queen and the rook. Yeah, and this is just winning for white. This sort of position is just winning for white. So what really is black's best move would be this D takes c6. It opens up these possibilities, yeah, so it pins the knight. But anyway, so in the game, black though just took an exchange, and probably it's a bad idea to win the exchange if your opponent's name is either Topalov, Ivanchuk, or Memodoriov, or, you know, one of those kind of Tau-like players. It's a bad idea in general to win the exchange, especially if your opponent can then get a pawn for the exchange, or even 2 pawns for the exchange, because you're going to experience your position just deteriorating really badly, and it's going to end badly. It really is going to end badly. So here black has won the exchange. This is bad news for black to win the exchange. You can just correlate, in fact, winning material with the opponent having dynamic play. You can admit, even without calculating anything, you can say, oh, you're winning material, your opponent's winning material, or you're winning material, expect some horrible dynamic play from the opponent, because that is the downside of winning any material in chess. When you're playing someone good, you're going to give them dynamic play. You don't have to calculate anything, just assume it. Just assume this is going to be bad. So black has won the exchange. What does white play here? Technically, actually, it's still okay for black, but white has what seems to be a useful forcing move, bishop e4. So we've got 2 threats now, taking, and also bishop takes h7, which damages the pawn chain around black's king. And black again didn't react in the most accurate way possible here, it seems, which might be, it seems on brief analysis, bishop a3. So on bishop a3, it doesn't seem entirely lost for black just yet. It's a pawn fine, but black actually played bishop b2, which seems logical because the knight's kind of loose and it's attacked now twice. But here we have a very interesting move. Very interesting. So with the knight hanging, what does white play here? White's play here. What would you play in this position? Any ideas? So your knight seems to be attacked, right? That would seem to make black's move bishop b2 a rather good move. You're taking with either queen or the bishop. Black doesn't have to necessarily defend h7, it seems. But what do you play? White's play. Okay, now probably technically after this move, it seems bishop takes h7 might be technically the best, but we have an interesting move instead. Knight takes e6. It's really the case the engines hate this game. This is a completely unsound game, it seems, technically. It's just good Mamedorov isn't playing an engine abuser going to the toilet every move. Otherwise he would have really badly lost this game. It would have been a non-memorable game. It would just be another of those games, what happened to Mamedorov. But no, he was playing human, that wasn't cheating. Yeah, so black made a mistake here. Yeah. And, well, no, black in this position actually played what seems to be the best move. He played, f takes e6. Actually, the Fritz 13 engine is a bit old hat technology. It's starting to like white's position now after f takes e6 at a certain depth. Anyway, it's changing its tune about this. It's not so negative about white's prospects here. So with this piece sack, there's only 2 pawns around the king, and now after bishop takes h7 there's only 1 pawn around the king, and maybe it seems the king should go to f7 on initial inspection, but it starts to look a bit scary because these pieces are over here and the queen and bishop are paying the king a visit. The king goes to h8. Okay, so white is playing like a rook down by this point. He's actually a rook down, but the silver lining of this is that black has only got 1 pawn next to his king, and the light square control seems quite good positionally, and white doesn't have to even lose the knight here. The knight can actually become a fierce attacking piece. It can be moved here. So white doesn't need to lose that knight, knight e4, and in fact it's got a great square here, knight g5 coming up. So black seems to have some defensive problems, and the most blatantly obvious way to sort of defend against knight g5 would seem to be a bishop retreat to be able to chop the knight off. Another idea which was played was rook f8. So it's a really interesting position now. A rook down, right? This is a rook down, but for how many pawns? For 2 pawns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. White's got 7 pawns, but you'll notice two bits each, and white's missing an entire rook here. White's a rook down, but it's pretty. It's interesting stuff. No need to panic here. White plays a calm looking move, bishop g6, and by cutting off the exits of the black king, even though he's a rook down, he's also cut off, by the way, the queen coming to h5. The bishop's controlling h5 as well, and yeah, it starts to look a little bit dangerous. For example, knight g5, and then maybe queen slips into h5 soon, where that knight's blocking the 5th rank, and then it'll be like mating time on h7. But yeah, of course we could give white quite a few moves and make that work, but it's black's move here. But even so, even with black to move in this position, it's a dangerous position. He plays king g8, and even though that plan looks incredibly slow, it's actually still rather dangerous here, it seems, to play queen e2 or knight g5. In fact, the engine actually likes white's position after knight g5, funny enough, as well. I think because one of the ideas is also you don't have to play queen e2. You could kick the king back to h8 first, and then go queen g6, and then try and get onto h5 like that. So there seems to be emerging here some interesting, very interesting possibilities in this position. So knight g5 would seem very, very dangerous. Queen e2 also, quite dangerous. And here, rook f6 would seem a way of evicting an attacking piece, but maybe white's going to be okay. You can actually slip in a move like this to get the queen off the 5th rank, then take the exchange here. This sort of position is really quite dangerous, threatening a mate in 3 here, because we've got this check and a mate here. We've got d6 covered as well, for example. Right, this is just a dangerous variation. Okay, but black didn't actually play rook f6, but it doesn't necessarily save black here. So black played bishop f6, and the idea of taking some time just to reduce the resourcefulness of the queen would seem a bit of a luxury here, but it's actually a remarkably powerful move in this position to kind of cut off the queen from h5, because we want our queen on h5, right? So white plays c5, just cutting off the queen from h5. So yeah, this is like a slow motion attack. It's like white's not really caring about this extra rook. Imagine if you didn't care about the extra rook on b8. Yeah, you would be a bit more leisurely about this attack. Okay, you want to stop the queen defending h5, you play c5, but okay, it's a rook down, but it's the attacking force is still increasing, and it's fundamentally, you know, there's only one pawn around the king, right? Black's king looks starting to look a bit shaky. Black played here bishop c3, and this really is happening. Queen h5 now, threatening a mate in 1. Black tries to defend with rook f5. And actually, technically, there is a mate in 3 here with check. For some reason, maybe Memdorov was in time pressure, but this still stands. That's still mating black. I'm hoping I've got the right game score, but apparently Memdorov, maybe he was overexcited or something. He took on f5 and played the check. Maybe he just thought this was winning as well. This is just a mating sequence anyway. Knight g5 check, rook d6 check, so it doesn't matter about the quicker mate. Bishop f6 check, king g6, queen h7 checkmate. Yeah, it took a longer route to checkmate, but who cares? Yeah, bishop takes f5 is a mate in 10 actually, technically. It's been identified here as a mate in 10, whatever happens. So the quickest is just check, queen e8. But yeah, this is just mating anyway. Check. It's mate in 4. It's a forced mate in 4. Check. Yeah, queen h8 check and queen h7. There's also, if white wanted, rook f6 here. There's another mating way. Yeah. So I thought this game was quite interesting. And I'm not entirely sure, in fact, to what extent it's even technically flawed. You really need to run engines quite deeply, leave them running. I'm you know, not entirely sure, but the reason I'm sticking with by the way, Fritz this year is it's more stable for broadcasts. So anyway, but yeah, the game gave a very interesting attacking impression to me, which may or may not be the right conclusions to draw from such a game. You know, in a few weeks' time, you're not going to remember many details about this game, you know. And what you might remember is, okay, exchange sacrifices give you more time for your attack. The number of pawns around the opponent's king is a factor to weigh in. don't panic even if you're a rook down. Just what would you need to do to carefully cut off, you know, the king's exits and get your attacking pieces in without any problems. You know, because yeah, what were these two pieces doing in the final position? Spectator pieces, right? So yeah, maybe, you know, we can learn something from this attacking game. What do you think about Mamedorov in this game? It started off quietly, and black seemed to be calling the shots with these petty little forcing moves, and from that, this liberation with the exchange sacrifice to say to black, okay, I've had enough of your petty forcing moves. I don't care, I'm going to play a rook down and just go for your king. And so, you know, for me it added quite a lot of excitement to the game. Yeah? So what do you think about this game? Is that the right sort of conclusion to draw from it? Does anyone want a rewind? I mean, should we see if there were any major defences, or should we go on to another game? I don't know if it would like spoil the dynamism if we did think there was some defence. I mean, I'm not even sure we can. Does anyone know if this game's actually proven to be completely unsound, or do we care? Should we just go on to another game? I don't know. Let's just assume it was all completely sound. So anyway, so if it was all completely sound, definitely we can draw the conclusion that sometimes, okay, especially at the faster time limits, you can sacrifice the exchange and start calling the shots around the opponent's king safety. Yeah, just destroy the opponent's pawn chain around their king, try and get your major pieces to the opponent's king, and don't worry about being a rook down. Okay, and on that note, let's go on to another game. Okay, I'm going to find another game from the Qatar Masters. Now, there was a Magnus Carlsen game in an early round, which at least I've played over. I'm not saying is mega exciting. So, yeah, I don't want to sort of put a downer on it, but this is probably not as exciting now, this game I'm going to show you. But it wasn't covered on the channel, so let's have a look at it. So this was Magnus Carlsen starting to build up his points in round 2. So he was playing against Chitambram Avrinda, okay, who was 2-4-8-6. So against Magnus Carlsen playing black. So we have e4, and Magnus played the Sicilian defense. And we have this b3 move. No, there is a name for b3. There is a name. I forgot what it's called. But I'm definitely sure there's a name for it. It's just escaped me. I've played it myself. Does anyone know the name of this b3 thing? I've forgotten myself. I'm sure it's got a name. Magnus just played g6, and with g6 he's saying to black, look, I don't care if you're going to take on f6 here. Knight f6. Now should white take on f6? You know, from a simplistic point of view, you might think, well, if you take on f6 you double black's pawns, yeah, but also you get a position where it would seem that d5 control is good. But you've got to balance that all the time with black's bishop pair and black playing f5 in the future. But also, not only has black got the bishop pair here, these dark square weaknesses might come back to haunt you later. So it's not something to be taken lightly to take on f6 here. In fact, it's a very rare move to take on f6. Players usually play what was played in the game, which is e5. We have knight d5, so Magnus is not scared of this e6 hitting the rook. e6 is the most common move. And we have this f6, e takes d7, queen takes d7. And the problem I would see for white in this position is black has got this semi-open file blasting down the d file and is usually going to be in a good position to get control of d4. On the bright side for white, maybe he's got some light square play to look forward to. But anyway, Magnus starts putting more pressure on the d4 square. So hang on, we see knight c3, knight c6. I mean, it already seems a little bit weird if white's trying to claim some sort of advantage. Is there an advantage for white? Bishop b5. Probably not after that. That might actually be an inaccurate move, bishop b5. Although it's a rare bird position. It's a rare position. So bishop b5. We have knight c7. But you can say already, you know, black has completely marked out a key central square. So surely black has kind of equalized here. Magnus has surely equalized in this position. Yes, the Snyder variation, pardon me. Well done, Ashwin. Yes, this whole b3 thing is called the Snyder variation, as far as I remember. So anyway, black seems to have equalized. Now black's dream goals might be to, you know, blot out this bishop later and to reinforce d4 control. Okay, white gives up the light square bishop. We have queen takes c6. And white's playing queen f3 now. Magnus doesn't mind the exchange of queens potentially. Bishop d7. White doesn't really want to help black by taking. Here, just helping develop black's pieces. White castles queenside. We have this e5 move. Okay, it's locking out the bishop. It's marking out d4. It might be weakening a bit the light squares in the position. White now actually did take on c6 and played the move f3. And I wonder how much regret we would have if any of us was playing white, that have we kind of wasted the white pieces here, given up the bishop here, let Magnus secure a massive central square. It just seems unfortunate, and especially unfortunate in a modern era of chess where we've got so much communication, so much database power. You'd think, you know, we'd want to play some sort of sharp opening against the world champion, some razor sharp, and use some weird, you know, games that we might have seen to have something dynamic to present on the table on the day we play the world chess champion, not this poxy position which looks as though it's a simple positional grind. So there's the tragedy of this game already. Black seems to be better in this modern age where white could have chosen a whole spectrum, you'd think, of sharp openings, but no, has chosen this. Okay, so Magnus just strengthens his grip on the d4 square with knight e6. So we've got this huge bind on the d4 square. Knight ge2. Bishop e7. So the bishop pair, d4 square control, reverse Moxie bind. What has white got to show here? Rook hf1. Okay, an excitement with f4, except g2 is a concern. b5, stretching out on the queen side, decentralizing potentially white a bit. On the other hand, this might start working together. If a knight can come to e4, there might be some control on f5 at least, you'd think. Rook d e1. Magnus doesn't even need to castle in this position. He could castle on either side. In fact, the engine is suggesting castling on either side would give black a significant advantage. But he just plays king f7. So white's in a grovelly type position and plays knight d1. We have a5. I mean, the rook is ideally placed for this space gain. Although, one thing about white's position, it doesn't seem apparent how white's getting completely smashed after a5, a4. I mean, it's not totally apparent that pieces are going to be loose or whatever, the king's going to get mated. It's not apparent. So can white try and grovel this position as far as possible? So he plays knight e3. And it looks as though this might actually be a threat now. The knight is protecting the g2 pawn. So f4 might actually be on the cards with the king here. Has Magnus made a mistake? Was this a bit overconfident, putting the king here, staring the rook? How things have changed. It looks as though white's actually got piece coordination between the bishop and the rook, and this pawn conspiring for the king on f7 here. But let's not get overexcited. This is white's first threat, it would seem. f4 in the game. f4 might actually be threatened. We have bishop d6, keeping a bind though. The bishops are looking pretty solid here. Knight c3. And it looks now, again, based on the king's position, that knight e4 is a little bit more effective than maybe it should be with the king there. Because if we get this position, the king shouldn't be there, right? We have h5. And now a4. Trying to close things up on this side of the board. b4. And now white does celebrate knight e4. Yeah, it seems as though somehow, magically, the opponent has actually gone from a significant disadvantage with white pieces to almost equalizing now here. Maybe, I'm talking technically from a scientific perspective, maybe Magnus should have just castled earlier on the king side or the queen side. It seems he's given white some sort of glimmer of hope here. Black shouldn't really take this knight. He actually retreats the knight. I think if black takes, then white's going to be in fine shape in this position with knight c4. Beautiful square for the knight coming. This would be some sort of nightmare. For example, this. You can turn into a nightmare. No. With the king there, no way. No way. Just retreat the bishop. But still knight c4, and white's kind of almost equalized. We have h4 being played, and now an aggressive looking move at move 23, g4. Wow, g4. Probably white didn't need to do this 100%. There's actually a dynamic way of playing this position, which the engine has just mentioned. Just sack a knight. Knight takes e5. Maybe there's a bit of compensation here. You never know. This sort of position. If white can coordinate the remaining pieces, it might not be too terrible. But anyway, he didn't play that. This looks as though, in principle, it's weakening f4. But it's got an idea of undermining e5. g5 does seem to be a significant idea to undermine the pawn structure, with a lot of pressure being put on e5 right now. So this was taken. And then we have rook h3 and g4 again. So it seems again g5 is actually a threat. And against this, Magnus casually played rook d8. Just rook d8, yes, incredibly. We have g5 incoming to try and undermine the centre a bit. But now bishop takes e4, f takes e4, And this is really clever stuff, actually. I mean, really clever stuff. It seems great in principle to undermine e5, but Magnus actually plays a really clever idea now. Knight f4, and although it seems as though he's crumbling to bits here, after g takes f6, funny enough, he didn't play king takes f6, which allows rook takes f4 check, but had in mind a brilliant conception here, which does solve the issue of the crumbling center. Can you see what black played here? So black's play, but it seems as though, and this is remarkable, white's actually got an edge now. Even in the game continuation, white's actually achieved almost a half a pawn advantage. So credit to white. He seems to have, after what seemed to be a passive position, be getting a tiny advantage here. What does black play to solve the problems in this position? So black's play has to solve his centre being under pressure. What does he play? Anyone? Yeah, he has to resort to king e6. And I kid you not, Fritz 13 thinks this is nearly, half a pawn advantage to white. So it's actually a remarkable achievement. Yeah. Now you might think, okay, what can white do if white plays f7? That is a little bit testing because you have to collect that pawn because it could be a pain, right? He didn't play this. I mean, f7 is an interesting idea. He played actually knight e3. Maybe this is a slight mistake. Another idea is rook h1. On rook h1, for example, it's pretty dangerous, this position. If we do this, f7, the king is like trying to defend the center here. If we go back, this position, let black recollect the pawn, we get control of the h file. But yeah, I think maybe white was getting a bit overexcited or something. He did manage to equalize and then even get a small advantage here. He plays f7, might be a good move, or rook h1. He plays actually knight e3. The knight seems to be quite well placed on c4, hitting e5, and is retreating. But the idea would seem to be knight d5 to try and open up this rook to e5. So Magnus plays g5 here. Knight d5. Again, this might not be the best in this position to play it. Maybe white should try and fight for this h file. If here, this position, imagine this position, white should be okay. White should be okay. But yeah, he played actually knight d5, hitting bishop. Bishop moves to d6. And is it actually too late even to contest the h file now? If rook h1, well, there's a problem now. Black's king is quite useful. We can actually take here or here. That doesn't seem too clever. So maybe, white's put off rook h1. He plays rook g1. And we have this move rook g8. And the thing that really, I mean, this was a few days ago when I played through this game. The thing that really struck me as a kind of clever thing about Black's play. Okay, he's kind of solved the central pressure, the e5 issue with this temporary pawn sack. But the temporary pawn sack is actually created for Black, even though a pawn down. Paradoxically, Black is the one with the passed pawn. Yeah? Black is the one with the dynamism. Now, this passed pawn is a bit of a danger to White. We see rook g4, and Magnus tries to maximize this danger that he's created, this passed pawn. So rook h4. He just ignores trying to get this pawn back. He doesn't want to try and open up White's pieces with knight takes d5. This would be a mistake, generally speaking, to try and get the pawn back. No, Magnus has created a trump card. So what? He's material down. He pushes his trump card, literally, g4. This is now, out of nowhere, a dangerous passed pawn in this position. White can't really allow the pawn to have a friend next to it. Connected passed pawns. This would be even worse. So White is also, the other problem for White is Magnus has hatched this egg, this trump card in the position at the right time, because this is around move 33. White has to get to the time control at move 40. So if you have an emerging dangerous trump card, that's a good time, because that's the blunder zone of most one-day games, is around move 40. You want your trump card to actually represent serious critical danger to the opponent, so they blunder before move 40, right? That's the name of the game. You want to maximize both your trump card and the use of the blunder zone, which is usually time pressure before move 40. And both seem to be happening now. Knight e3, we've got this dangerous trump card, g3, it's pushed. Knight f5, even though this looks really aggressive, it looks really aggressive, but Magnus now just plays this move back, and there's a tactical basis for it, you'd hope. Why isn't White just winning this g3 pawn here? And it's pretty sick. This is a pretty sick, disgusting tactic, actually, I've just spotted in this position. Why this is actually even possible, that this trump card can actually get there without being eliminated. Have you guys noticed the disgusting tactics in this position for Black? No, I haven't turned on an engine to cheat. I'm just assuming my calculations are right. But White played f7, yeah? If White plays rook takes g3, do you know why this is such a disaster? White didn't play rook takes g3. But do you know why rook takes g3 is a total disaster? Yeah, the unfortunate position of the king. The king, if you note, hasn't got too many exit squares. So in this position, Black has, yeah, it's really sick. Black has knight e2 check. And if takes, you know, forking king and rook. If takes, this is disgusting, isn't it? It's disgustingly tragic. So, yeah, we're reaching this combination of the blunder zone and Black's trump card, and Magnus seems to have spotted important tactics based on the king's lack of squares. So this is unfortunate that, yeah, this passed pawn is so dangerous here. White plays f7 here. In fact, well, the engine suggestion is massively better for White anyway now by this stage. d3. White's really blown things, because d3 g2, and in this position apparently Black's just a load better. He's going to take here and then probably just win the exchange later with knight h3. So black's is a load better now. So anyway, f7 was tried. Magnus is hardly going to blunder his bishop, right? He's not going to do this. No, he's not going to do that. He played rook g6. And unfortunately the bishop holds f8, otherwise we could distract the rook. But if f8, I think we just take with the bishop, right? Because if we're forced to take with the rook, then white could actually have the luxury of playing rook takes g3 without getting exterminated. But unfortunately the bishop covers f8. So white played here king d1. He's trying to sort out his king. But it leaves this horrible trump card, this passed pawn, g2. And in fact, white here is faced with knight h3, just winning the exchange. To which white actually is not in a position to do much about. Black firmly controls the h3 square. There seems to be very little defense. Okay, we can try rook e2. Yeah, that's a try, but that just loses the exchange like that. No, so knight h3. If you know, give a move for white, knight h3. We're just losing the exchange. I don't know what white does. Knight takes d6, just delays things. Knight h3 is threatened. Play this. I think it still just delays things. Knight h3 is threatened. If rook e3, again knight h3, because we've also still got tactics like this, winning. So yeah, it seems after f7 rook g6, black, well, I think the opponent might have lost on time or something anyway, or either he lost on time. Sorry, after g2, this position. Let me get the game score again. After g2, yeah, I think he resigned. I think white resigned. Why not knight e3? Pardon me, knight e3. Let's have a look. Knight e3. Here, king takes f7. Oh, right. Oh, well spotted. Knight e3, yeah. But black is +3 apparently. The analysis here is +3. So let's examine this. So you're right, it does stop knight h3 because there's rook g2, right? So that's not the threat anymore, but there's different threats instead. Okay, so let's see what does white play in this position. Let's say white plays d3 for sake of argument. King e6. What is black actually doing? Rook h2 and then knight h3. Yeah, rook h2 and then knight h3. I think well done on being resourceful, but try and be resourceful from here because you haven't got the e2 square to play with. Yeah, and black's now just going to play rook h2 and knight h3. So what bright ideas are there to stop that now? Come on then. Because I think white's running out of squares now to actually defend against knight h3 prepared. Yes, you forced knight e3 has forced a preparation of knight h3. It's true. I acknowledge knight e3. It's only a delaying tactic. It's only a delaying tactic. What you play here, black is threatening rook h2 and knight h3. There might even be another tactic actually in the form of c4. Actually, this might even be an even more important one. Let's just examine these two ideas. If we give white a move, say king d2, then either rook h2 or c4 is pretty dangerous apparently. Say c4 here as an example. Knight takes, we distract that pesky knight and we get our knight h3 in. Yeah, and if we don't take with the knight, we take with one of the pawns, then bishop c5, and then we're going to get our knight h3 in. Because any rook takes, we got check, and then we're going to win the rook. What does white play in this position? White's kind of out of defensive squares and possibilities. But there was also rook h2. White is also defenseless here after rook h2. Because now we're defending the pawn and then we're going to play knight h3. Okay, so all the proponents of knight e3, do you accept defeat now? Yeah, knight e3, black's still winning. Yeah, we're just going to take care, and then we're going to prepare knight h3 with either rook h2 or c4 once white plays d3. We're going to play like this. Yeah. I mean, just in principle, it looks as though white's going to be out of defensive resources. Is that correct? Because black, if you look at the position, black still has that massive bind on the d4 square. He just needs to prepare the knight h3. It's true. He prepares the knight h3. No defenses here. Do we all agree? I'm going to type this. All agree? No defenses? No defense, right? We can try knight f5. That's the engine move. King e6 is mentioned, or bishop c7. And again, we're going to have knight h3 or c4. Bishop c1. Either bishop b6 or knight h3. Okay, I must admit I wasn't that amazed by Magnus's play in this game the first time I saw the game. What I thought was nifty, and these may be the wrong conclusions, but my conclusions from the game is, you know, when you sacrifice the pawn, you can actually be a pawn down and have a dangerous passed pawn, which is a funny thing, isn't it? This knight h3 apparently is something which, as we've seen, might need some preparation in some of these lines. But there's an element, isn't there an element of Korchnoi-ism in Magnus's play? Why does it even put his king on f7 in this game? Why couldn't he have just castled like a normal human being? It's as if he provoked white. That's another interesting thing. He put his king on f7, seemingly giving white a plan. And white did seem to technically, you know, equalize. So there's another question there. If Magnus had just castled, I mean, I don't really like rewinding that much, but instead of this, you know, king f7 business, yeah, I mean, why step into a file the rook could open up? If castling, would that have been so bad? Would it? But anyway, the game took a very exciting turns after this. I mean, it took a very exciting turn of events, where Magnus is sacrificing a pawn and generating this pass pawn here. Maybe, you know, sometimes you've got to, you know, be like provocateur, you know, like Korchnoi, you know, try and get the opponent to commit to something. So it seems to be the triumph of the passed pawn in this game. And on that note, so we'll carry on next week on some other games. So I hope you got something from these two games. And remember to like this video. I say all likes are appreciated on this video. Yeah. Did anyone get anything from these two games out of interest? I mean, I thought they were mildly interesting. Well, definitely the first one, and this one maybe not so much. Yeah, castling was another game. Yeah, I mean, white's play had a lot of logic to it. It's just unfortunate, this unfortunate side effect here, you know, that black had this passed pawn out of it. Unintended side effect. Okay, so Happy New Year. I hope you don't lose too many games of chess. And don't get too depressed by any games you lose online. Because as we all know, you know, we're in the engine era. So if you get completely demolished online, don't take it to heart. Just try and think about your own improvements that you're making. And you can always extend your knowledge in chess. So even if you remain really weak, you know, you can see interesting games at least. Yeah, you can enjoy chess just by playing through interesting games. But don't take any online chess to heart, is my advice. And try and get the most out of each day. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so see you next week. Yeah. Thanks.